Here's how you make some delicious, chewy, crunchy ciabatta buns, even if you've never made bread before. This recipe is super easy to remember. We're gonna start with 2 cups of warm water. I can put my knuckle in there, it doesn't sizzle off, because we don't wanna kill our yeasty friends. Next, we need 2 teaspoons of yeast. One of these packets is 2 1/4 teaspoons. It's okay, I'm putting the whole thing in. I'm using active dry yeast, which means that it needs to be woken up in the water, so it's gonna sit for about 5 minutes. If you're using instant yeast, dump it in and just go to the next step. Skip the 5-minute wait. A big ass bowl. Recipe calls for all-purpose flour. It's important to use all-purpose flour for this one because it has a lower protein count. In this case, we can't use bread flour because it has a much higher protein count, which will make it kind of nasty and gummy. We need about 600 grams of flour, which is between 4 and 5 cups. How can you tell the difference? If you're scooping straight out of this very compacted bag, assume 4 cups. If you've aerated your flour or kind of like transferred it to a bigger component so it had a chance to kind of get all airy, use 5 cups. 2 teaspoons of salt because everybody loves flavor. Give it a little mixeroonie so that we distribute the salt. It's kind of dorky, but if you're a nerd like me, you can actually watch the yeast come alive in the water. It kind of explodes like fireworks. It's been about 5 minutes. There's no foam on this. Oh, that was a good explosion. But I know that it's alive for 2 reasons. 1, I'm seeing movement, and 2, I can smell the yeast. It smells like a dive bar. Pour all of this in, make sure to get all the yeast out. Give this 20 big stirs all the way around the bowl. For me, right around 15 stirs, it got a little bit more difficult to stir. So we're gonna switch to spatulettes. Give the scraggly bits a little scrape down. And now what you're gonna do is 10 spatulettes, which is a scoop from the bottom, punch with your spatula. This is a word I made up, so if you go Googling, you're not gonna find anything. After about 10 spatulettes, you should see a very wet dough. Great job, you've already made your dough. If your dough is fluid, like goopy, like it's not holding its shape at all, go ahead and add a 1/2 cup to a cup of flour and do 20 more stirs until it's this consistency. You can see it's holding its shape. If yours is a little bit on the drier side, don't worry. Some of the fluid created by the proofing process will help compensate for that. Cover this baby, put it somewhere warm, meaning not cold. You could put it on your counter, you could put it in the oven with just the light on, and let it sit for 1 hour. See you in an hour. She has grown, and also you might see some bubbles. All good. Now, get one hand wet. We're gonna do a set of 6 stretch and folds. It's exactly what it sounds like. With my wet hand, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna pull one side of the dough over to the other, all around the dough. Keeping your hands wet keeps it from sticking to this uber sticky dough. Let sit for another 30 minutes. For our second stretch and fold, same thing, go all the way around your dough, probably around 6 stretch and folds. If you're wondering why you do this instead of traditional kneading, think of it as different types of workouts. All kinds of workouts are good for people, but some like weightlifting and some like running. Notice that the texture of the dough is changing a little bit every time you do the stretch and fold. That's great. Let this sit for another 30 minutes. Numero 3. So by not kneading it the traditional way with like your palm and stuff, we're keeping a lot of the bubbles in here, which is exactly what we want for ciabatta bread. Cover, let sit for 30 minutes, then we'll get to shaping. Now is the time is now to make a clean surface, unclean, with kitchen lube. She's beautiful. Try not to smash her. We're just coaxing her out onto the surface, kind of just pawing at her. Help us, gravity. And add a little bit of kitchen lube to the top. What we're gonna do is scoop from the bottom where there's kitchen lube to help us and kind of stretch her into a rectangular shape. Tuck your fingers under because there's flour here, it shouldn't stick, and just kind of tug it into shape. Once it's roughly as long as your arm, stop pulling. And now what we're gonna do is roll this into a Dorito. Tuck your fingers underneath and just roll it and get the seam on the bottom. On the ends, make sure to pinch it gently just so that you don't have it like kind of a separate opening. This is gonna become 8 rolls, so I'm gonna use 2 small pans lined with parchment and give each a little sprinklage of kitchen lube. The nice thing about these rolls is they're a little bit rustic and so they won't look exactly the same. So you know what that means? you can give yourself a break. So I make lines in the flour so I know where to cut. What I recommend, press down all the way to the surface. In terms of picking them up, I recommend going from either side where there's flour. The side is gonna be very sticky because it's still wet. So make sure to pick up from the side and gently scoop like this, place it onto the pan. Fill the top with a little bit of flour. This is to help keep the towel from sticking. Drape with the towel, let rise for another 40 minutes. Before we put in the buns, make sure to put in a tray with water or an oven-safe pan with half an inch of water. The steam will help make the buns extra crispy. They look a poofy and a nice. See you in 20. My buns are almost done. I'm just gonna give them a few more minutes to brown up. Ta-da! We like to have a nice brown bottom that if you tap on it, sounds like it's hollow. Good job, you made your own ciabatta bread.